waits, and Johnson scores!
Masaba's in the middle. Wednesday here could seal it. Gassman finds Masaba.
Now Bannon with a great ball in. Here's an opportunity. Palmer scores! Liam Palmer has scored for Sheffield Wednesday.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday Till I Die podcast. I am Matt Johnson, and tonight we bring you a special episode with the well-renowned 1867 news platform on X, formerly Twitter, or better known as Simon.
Yes.
For those of you who do not know, this particular account reports, Simon and this particular account reports news from around Sheffield Wednesday, but most notably off-field activity at Sheffield Wednesday in recent times. If you haven't seen the tweet that we're going to be kind of discussing that sparked this kind of like discussion off over the weekend, it was a tweet that was sent out on Friday evening. And if you are thinking what on earth the next 30 to 45 minutes is going to be about, we hopefully will be able to enlighten you a little bit as to the news that broke just after Sheffield Wednesday's sad 4-0 defeat to Burnley on Friday evening. Just before we dive into that, there are a couple of things that I think both myself and Simon would like to clear up as well. There's been some confusion surrounding, and we did mention this on the main pod on Sunday at the weekend, surrounding potential affiliation and people making assumptions with protest groups and all the rest of it. So we're going to start with a big glaring question, Simon, which is, can I ask now, are you or are you not associated with the 1867 group?
No,
not
part of the group. Never, and I never have been. I mean, when they first started and they were doing the tennis ball chucking and that sort of thing, I was pretty critical of them and their efforts. Since then, I've actually spoken to Jim quite a few times, and he's a good guy. We've got on fairly well, and obviously we have a similar aim and a similar view to a lot of things that we've done. So I can't pretend that I'm not supportive of quite a bit of what they've done. But I'm not part of the group. I don't arrange protests. I've never printed any leaflets or anything of that sort. I wish I had £1 for every time I've had to defend somebody on Twitter saying, I'm sick of you lot and your protests. Wrong group. It's not me. You know, it was 1867, as everybody will know, is the year the club was formed. And the account has been called 1867 News for 10, 12 years, a long time before ever the protest group started. I wish I'd had some saying it. I'd have said to them, please don't call it the same name as I've got, because there'll be nothing but confusion. But some people don't really care. They just want to be able to give somebody some abuse. So I get some of it.
Yeah, for those who are even still after that wonderful explanation, for those of you who are still skeptical, please go just onto the 1867 news account and you can see the date that the account was registered at the top, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, it's June 2012.
It could well be, yes. I mean, to be honest, that account originally wasn't set up by me. There was 2 or 3 of us in the beginning, but the other lads have dropped off, and it's pretty much just only me, and has been for quite some time. But I didn't originally set it up back then. I've been sort of tweeting on there for about 10 years, but yeah. I wasn't the original founder of it.
Okay. First off, mate, before we dive into all of this discussion this evening, how are you, mate? You okay?
I'm fine. Yes, I'm very good. I mean, Wednesday fan, so it's never that good. It's always a disaster somewhere just around the corner. But yeah, otherwise it's been quite good. We've had a reasonable season, haven't we? It's not been too bad.
Do you know what, Simon? I would agree with you. I think when the dust settles at the end of this season and all of the panic and clamour for playoffs and managerial stuff and all the rest of it actually settles, I think in the history of things, it will probably go down as a somewhat, I think I'm having us down for a mid-table finish. I think it will go down as somewhat a slightly unforgettable season with some of the most exciting football that I think I've seen.
Brilliant football.
Sheffield Wednesday. Yeah.
No, it's been really good to watch. When the season started, my hope was that we could replicate what Danny did for the last 30-odd games of last season. And if you just took that in isolation, we were somewhere just outside the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I thought this season we could also be just outside the playoffs. If things go really well, we might just sneak that little bit extra. It's possible. Obviously, you know, when it's actually played out and you get yourself in 9th position, you want more. You want to get 6th, you want to get 5th. But realistically, 10, 11, 12, that's a good season. We've done as much as we could have possibly hoped for. In fact, we've probably done a little bit better than we've any right to do with the value of squad that we've got.
Simon, don't talk sense because it upsets and angers people. So on that note, Simon, let's dive into the reason why. Obviously, we're really grateful for you obviously coming on, but the reason why we've got you on to speak to you about. So again, the tweet that was sent out last week was surrounding the potential sale of the football club and interested parties and the kind of the progress that has been made and what has really happened. So we'll start off first off with, can I ask a question which I think will be on a lot of Sheffield Wednesday fans' mind? Is why are you wanting to do the podcast now?
Just simply because, that was a follow-up to a tweet from a couple of weeks earlier when we'd sort of announced that there was going to be a bid. And obviously, some people get very excited and they want to know more information. And at the time, we weren't really allowed to put out any more information. We didn't even put the name out, even though obviously we did know the name and we did know the details. We didn't even put that out. The name subsequently leaked out from a different source to us. So you get people wanting to know the details of it. And of course, you get a fair number of people who say, oh, you're talking rubbish, you don't know anything, you're making all this up, you're just doing this for likes and that kind of thing. So it requires an explanation, and probably the explanation is a little bit longer than a tweet is going to be able to allow. So I thought it might be nice just to be able to have a little bit of time just chatting as to where we are and where we're going with things.
Yeah, and I think that is, again, as I say, I particularly am really grateful for you doing so. We're told as Sheffield Wednesday fans, or we tell each other, I think more so than anything else, that there's nobody who is going to want to buy us. So the first question is that true?
Well, absolutely not. It's not true. I think some people say that. I think the primary person who says it is the current owner. We're always told by him that there's nobody who wants to be able to buy the club. Quite what his motivation is for that, you have to make your own mind up. But in terms of would anybody want to buy it? I mean, just look at the basic facts as they are. Football clubs are getting sold all the time. Clubs around us are being bought and sold. Clubs that are bigger than us, clubs that are smaller than us, clubs the same size of us. It's happening all the time. Investment is being made in football on a regular basis. And if you look at the recent sales, quite a few of them have come from the States. A lot of people from America have been interested in that. Of course, there's plenty of people with money over in the States. But I think a few years ago, a lot of the rich people sort of cottoned on to the fact that NFL is not the biggest show in town. I think they'd always assumed that was the big one. And if you're a wealthy businessman, there's 20 NFL franchises, and it's very difficult to be able to get hold of one. So if you've got some ambition to be able to own a major franchise in America and you've got the money to be able to do it, there's all manner of obstacles that's in the way. And I think it suddenly dawned on them that actually football is, on a global scale, is actually far bigger than NFL and has got a lot more money involved. And better still than that, they'll let any old fool come along and buy any old club. They don't really care. They do fit and proper persons, but basically that means as long as you're not currently in jail for criminal activities, everyone's kind of passes the fit and proper persons test. So realistically, anybody can come along and buy a sports club. So there is interest in football. There is, theoretically, people believe, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. If you manage to get yourself promoted to the Premier League, it's big, big bucks. So people are interested. Now, when you look at that, is you imagine to yourself, if you're interested in buying a football club, who are you going to buy? One of the very big clubs is going to cost you over $1 billion, isn't it? If you're looking at Man City, Man United, and some of the big boys, it's unrealistic amounts of money. So you need to be able to buy yourself somebody who could potentially be a Premier League club, could potentially has the size and the stature to get there, and is available at a price that is more sensible, that you can come along and look at it. Now, I think if you're a businessman and you're looking and you went down the list of league clubs, you get down to Sheffield Wednesday and think, no, there's one, there's potential. You think about it, there's only 20 clubs in the Premier League, but if you listed any sort of criteria for who should be in the top 20 clubs in the country, by pretty much any metric you used, Sheffield Wednesday would be one of them. Unfortunately, the only metric where we're not is the actual one that counts, which is the league position. We're nowhere, but we are genuinely a sleeping giant. And it's frustrating that so many of our fans have forgotten that, or even the younger generation have no reason to believe it. They just think it's old fogies like me who keep banging on about the glory days because they remember the 90s, but it's just not that anymore. So some people kind of think, yeah, we genuinely are a lower mid-table championship club at the best. We're not. We're a sleeping giant. We're one of the biggest clubs in the country, and all we need is running well. We'll be doing very good, but just running average. All we need, just don't be crap. That's basically all we need from an owner, and we seem never to be able to manage that. We've had so many years of mismanagement. We ought to be higher than we currently are. So if you're a man who's interested in investing in football, of which there are plenty, you are looking at which football club to buy. You don't want to buy one that's unnaturally small and probably could never support Premier League in the long term. Sheffield Wednesday really ticks pretty much every box. So in terms of would somebody buy us? Yes, of course they would. Of course they would. And people are interested. The big obstacle that you've got is we have an owner who says, if the fans want me to sell, I'll sell, and then doesn't. Who says, I'm putting the club up for sale, and then doesn't. Says, I'm not going to fund it anymore, and then he does. He says, well, you find me a buyer, and then he ignores it. You've got an owner who is very difficult to deal with. Now, if you're a serious businessman, what you don't want to do is get yourself involved in a circus. You don't want to have your name associated with a failed bid. We all remember people, who have tried to buy football clubs and failed, and they always end up looking a bit of a fool, even if they weren't a fool. There's a long list of people where go from remember Michael Knighton when he used to when he was doing the kick-ups on the pitch at Old Trafford, right down to the dodgy ones like Eric Alonso. As soon as you mention Eric Alonso and Jeff Sheard and Hafiz Mamadov and these kind of people, you're associating yourself with all manner of shady characters. So if you're a serious businessman, you've got some money behind you, what you don't want to do is go off too early, get yourself associated with a failed bid. So it can be very, very difficult to be able to get things started. So in terms of, is anybody interested in buying us? Absolutely. There are a number of people who have declared an interest, and there are also people who are sniffing around in the background, shall we say, who are certainly observing what is going on. And I would be fairly confident if there was an opportunity to buy the club at the market value, you would probably have an auction.
Understood. In terms of the name that leaked out recently, it's obviously connected to the ex-Wigan owner, and the information that is publicly available on that particular owner isn't great reading from a fan's perspective.
No.
The question that I suppose was posed by some Sheffield Wednesday fans, and the belief that was held by some, was, are we not better the devil we know with the current ownership as opposed to this new ownership?
The way that we looked at it, and when I'm saying we, I'm talking about, and this will sound contrary to what we said at the very beginning, but it was brought about by the recent fans forum. I mean, I asked Mr. Chansiri several questions, and quite a few other people asked questions. And at a point in that, he said, you find me a buyer. We all heard him say that. And obviously most people took it for just being a daft off the cuff thing that he's inclined to say. But Jim, who was at the time running the 1867 group, has got quite a few contacts within football. I think he did a degree in football management or some the running of clubs, that sort of thing. He does know one or two people. It also had conversations with the group who were protesting over at Reading, which sounds like they've finally managed to be able to get one of the people who sniffed around Wednesday. Actually, looks like he's going to be the preferred buyer over at Reading. So he knew one or two people. So he went away and made quite a number of phone calls. And some of those had said, as I just said there, they were interested, but were a little bit reluctant to come forward. One of which came through and said, yeah, I'm very much interested. I just had a failed attempt at buying part of Manchester United at the time when Jim Ratcliffe took over. So they had some money available and they were very much interested. So it wasn't myself who spoke to him, it was Jim who'd had that conversation, and he'd given some advice, and they talked backwards and forwards about it. And I think, as I understand it, I haven't spoke directly, but as I understand it, he came across as a genuine person, came across as certainly he had money available and he was interested in doing it the right way. I'm speaking on his behalf, so you have to take it for what it is. As I understand it, he's not necessarily the money man. he is representing other people in the background. And I believe the people who he was representing over at Wigan are not the people who he was representing when he was interested in buying Sheffield Wednesday. It's a different finance group. I think, as I understand, the rug was pulled from under him at Wigan. He didn't really have a lot of options in where it went further forward, whereas he was representing different people this time around. So it was the first person who came back and said, yes, I'm definitely interested. And yes, I definitely want to be able to go forward and be able to make contact and be able to make an offer, which was the point where I sent that tweet out and said, a bid is about to go in, a fairly serious bid. And as I said before, I didn't mention the name, partly because we're asked not to do, and partly because, as you just said, as soon as somebody gets onto Google, they're going to start, you know how these things go. They're going to start kicking off, and the deal will be dead in the water before you even start. And I didn't particularly want that to happen. That being said, Jim had mentioned himself, and I think I'd sort of mentioned it very briefly, without wanting to be rude to Talal. He wasn't our preferred bidder. I can quite understand why people thought this may well be out of the frying pan and into the fire. I can quite understand that. Our thinking behind it was, we are such a long way away from a sale, and nobody genuinely knows what Mr. Chansiri wants to do. And it seemed to me at the very least that maybe if somebody actually sat down across the table and actually had some money, actually had a few £1 million to wave in front of his face, he might suddenly start to think to himself, do you know what, maybe cutting my losses wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe he genuinely believes that nobody will be interested in buying the club at any sensible price. And it's like, if he's got a serious offer, that might just start the ball rolling. So we were kind of hoping that Talal, whether he was successful or not, and we weren't absolutely rooting for him being successful, if we're honest, but it might have broke the ice. It might have just simply got the door open. It might have got Chansiri sitting down to table and negotiating, and it may well have smoked out one or two of the other people who were looking in the background, who suddenly think, you know what, if the club is for sale, then I'm interested in declaring my hand.
Understood, because this isn't the first time that we've heard of potentially interested parties in taking over Sheffield Wednesday. Dejphon Chansiri is actually on record as saying at a fans forum that Adam Shaw, an American/Sheffield businessman, it was interested.
I think he prefers Sheffield/American.
Sheffield/American.
He's Sheffield born and bred. He's a Sheffield Wednesday fan, and he still lives in Sheffield. So I think it qualifies. Although to talk to him, he's got an accent that doesn't. He's not American, and he keeps calling it soccer.
Yeah,
but other than that, he's Sheffield.
Other than that, other than that,
it's a fairly fatal error to call it soccer, I would say. But
because he was obviously rumoured with that, and actually, not only was he rumoured with the takeover, he's previously been involved with the club on a sponsorship level, and at the fans forum, Chansiri actually gave a peek behind the financial curtain at Sheffield Wednesday in terms of he made claims that the money had run out and that the club hadn't received the second part of the funding from Adam Shaw. To the best of your knowledge, is what was said there true?
No. It was me who asked him the question, and we had a little bit of a back and forth, and the microphone was removed from me. I would have liked to have been able to ask one or two more questions based upon that. But I think we had enough was established there to be able to at least establish the legitimacy. Because, he does say, well, if he gets half a chance, he's got no money. And that's absolutely untrue. I don't want to have this in a contest, but if he had to say who's got the most money in the two of them, I know my £5 would not be going to Thailand, quite honestly. I can't speak personally for him, but I have spoken to him on a number of occasions, and I've done quite a little bit of investigation into his finances and into his background to the degree that the information is available. And to be fair to him, he's a nice fella, and he by and large does answer questions. So if you ask him the details, he's been kind enough to be able to give me the answers. But it's not really my place to go discussing somebody else's finances on a public forum. But he's a very wealthy man, significantly wealthy, and he's wealthy enough to be able to buy Sheffield Wednesday on his own if that's what he wanted to do. That I'm quite happy to stand on. I know there's a lot of people who say, he ain't got a pot to piss in is the general phrase that's there. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely untrue. He's a significantly wealthy gentleman. And of course, when you are a wealthy person and you are used to running businesses you hang around in different circles. You and I probably don't come across many multimillionaires, but if you are one, then obviously you're hanging around with other people who are multimillionaires. It's not unreasonable that you come across other business associates. So his discussion that he has other people who are interested in backing him, who are interested in joining him in a consortium, is absolutely true. It's frustrating. I'm not at liberty to discuss the names. I do know the names, and if I told you the names, you would know them. At least one of them is a household name, but I'm not allowed to discuss it, unfortunately. But in terms of have they got any money, if I told you who the name was, you'd say, "Oh, really?" There's no issue with money. I would suggest one of them is at the very least a billionaire a few times over. When money is not the issue in terms of this consortium.
Okay. Turning our attention back to this one, you've touched on it a little bit here, but could you explain how you've come to be involved in the most recent takeover talks surrounding the football club?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at the fans forum we had that conversation, and that's when he'd said, Adam Shaw's got no money, and he owes me money. So I went back to Adam and said, look, this is what was said very publicly about you at the fans forum. I know that it's not true, but I think a lot of fans don't. I mean, why? Fans believe it to be the case that you owe money, and that obviously you ran out of money, or whoever it was that was giving you money. I mean, the cheek of that. I mean, really for the chairman to say whoever was giving him money turned the taps off and wouldn't give him any more. And the irony that was the accusation that he wanted to make. But yeah, so I went back to him and said, look, this has been said in a public forum. I think at the very least you have a right of reply. And in many ways, I think you have a responsibility to reply, because if you don't say anything about it, then it kind of goes as being unchallenged. So I spoke to him and I asked him a few questions, and that's why I tweeted out a statement from him, which was basically refuting the allegations that were made. So I've kept in relatively close contact with him. From that, he authorised for me to be able to put that statement out on his behalf. Refuting what had been said. So as a result of that, I have always been in close contact, and he's always said to me that he was interested in buying the club should that ever come about. So as we said before, that Mr. Chansiri had said to fans, "You go and find me a buyer," and Jim had done just that. He'd gone out there and he'd found a buyer. Now, when Talal spoke to us, he said that he was going to approach the club. And he said that he was going to make an offer. So naturally, we were quite excited to see how this would play out. And a week or two later, when asked for an update, we were told that it had a bit of a breakthrough. And it turned out that Mr. Chansiri was actually wanting out. And he wanted out quite urgently. He'd had enough and he wanted to sell. And we were very excited by that, because, to be honest, that wasn't what we expected. We thought we were going to get the same old door slammed in his face, club's not for sale, not interested. But he came back and said, no, that wasn't the case. He'd submitted his proof of his funding, and he'd had a good conversation, and a price had been agreed. He told us the price. I can't disclose it, but the price is, I mean, you could probably guess. If you had a guess at the price, you'd not be a million miles away. Our neighbours down the road were sold for 104 million, and they're worth significantly more than Sheffield Wednesday, aren't they? You look at the value of their squad, and you look at their position. You look at the fact that they're probably going to get promoted back to the Premier League. They're worth a really good chunk more than Sheffield Wednesday. So if you take 104 million and minus a good chunk, you'll be in the ballpark of the figure we were told. That's as far as I can go without disclosing a figure I'm not supposed to disclose. It was a reasonable amount, and it sounded plausible. It wasn't what we expected, but I thought, this is fantastic. Maybe we're going to get somewhere. Maybe we're going to be able to make some progress. But as we'd said earlier, if we're being honest, without wanting to be rude to Talal, who had been more than generous with his time speaking to us. We didn't want to be rude to him, but he wasn't our preferred bidder. So we said, probably if he's going to be buying the club, we probably ought to let one or two other people know that maybe progress has been made, just in case they would like to declare their hand. And I spoke to a few people. I'd spoken to Adam. We'd spoken to one or two other people that were there, and wanted just simply. It was decided that we ought to just have a word with the club. Let's see if the club would be interested in just having an off the record conversation, just to let them know. There are people interested, and we know who are interested. And if the figures were being discussed are the accurate figures, we probably can find you a buyer. And I know how ridiculous it sounds. It sounds ridiculous that Chansiri would ask fans to find a buyer. That's a crazy situation. And it's crazy that fans would then go away and go looking. But we had done that, and we actually had come up with the goods. We'd actually found at least two people who were interested in buying the club, if possible. So nonetheless, obviously we spoke to the club and said, I contacted the club and said, can we have a chat? Is there something we can talk about? Because, I've got some information which you probably would find interesting. What can we do? And the response was, the club's not for sale. But then the second part of the response was, but if you want to put a bid in, you need to send a bank statement verified by a solicitor, which I don't want to be rude to anybody, but, if you're buying a club for millions of pounds, given I understand how ridiculous it is that I'm a fan having the conversation, and I can quite understand why you might just want to fob me off, why I might just want to say, go away, we're not interested. I understand. But they didn't do that. They said the club's not for sale, but this is how we should go about launching a bid, which was problematic, because they wanted effectively, a group of multimillionaires to send a bank statement, and I kind of politely went back to the club and said, we're not applying for an iPhone on 12-month contract here. You don't send a bank statement and two proofs of address. This is a multi-million-pound transaction, and these are serious players. Nobody sends a bank statement when we don't have any agreement in place. In how much money should the bank statement have? We haven't even discussed a figure. It's just ridiculous that would be the way that you would propose selling a club. So, I politely said, I understand why you might not be taking us seriously, but, we are quite serious and we would like a conversation, and no one's going to send a bank statement. But if you want proof of funds and you want the information, I'm quite confident I've spoken and you can have that. That's not a problem at all. So what you need to do is, and this has been raised before, and I said, can I get the buyer and their legal department to send an NDA through, a non-disclosure agreement through, because the information that they're going to disclose, their financial information, their personal details even, is not for public consumption. As I said before, in the name of one of the consortium, it's a well-known name, and they don't want to be known in public with a failed bid. But they were more than happy to disclose the information as long as it was covered by an NDA. And the reply was, we don't need to sign an NDA because we're not in negotiations. But if we get in negotiations, we'll sign one. Just send a bank statement. And you kind of think this is frustrating, because it wasn't just no, it wasn't just the club's not for sale. It wasn't, we don't trust you, we don't believe you, we think you're just a fool messing us about. It was, we won't cooperate in the way that a business is sold. And it was a little bit frustrating in the sense that I kind of understand what Mr. Chansiri was saying when he was at the forum. He got a lot of stick for it. But when he was answering questions, he'd say to people, do you run your own business? And I kind of know what he meant. If you've run your own business and you've been involved in business finance, if you've ever bought a business or you've ever sold a business, you'd have some understanding as to how the process might work. And it's kind of in that situation there. Alistair, who I was dealing with primarily at the forum, described himself self-deprecating in a way, but actually very truthful, as just the man from the ticket office. And I think that was my worry. You've got just the man from the ticket office negotiating to sell a multi-million-pound business to just a man who runs a Twitter account. It's a bit silly. I was well aware of it, but nonetheless, it was important because this was a serious offer. This is a serious opportunity to get the club sold. Mr. Chansiri says he wants to sell the club. If someone wants to offer it, we have people wanting to buy. Let's at least have the conversation. But to do that, all they have to do is sign an NDA. And I said to them at the time, realistically, there's nothing to be lost by that. It's going to cost you nothing to sign it. If you sign the NDA and no information comes through, well, then nothing is lost. And if the information comes through and it turns out he's got no money, as you keep saying publicly, well, that's fine. There's nothing to be lost. But if the information comes through and it's solid, which I know that it will be, and an offer comes through which is solid and is one that you would consider, well, everybody's in a chance of moving forward here. So it was very frustrating from my point of view that the club it wasn't that they didn't take it seriously. Their method of selling the club wasn't serious. They tried to sell the club in the same way as you would apply for an iPhone if you're going to Vodafone in Meadowhall, but not the way they would be done professionally.
Because my next question, I suppose, is why do you think that the club have behaved in this way? I suppose rather than because it sounds to me as if it's not been completely rejected.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't completely. I could have stood that.
Yeah, there's not been a formal rejection. I suppose my question is, why do you think the club have handled it in this particular manner?
There's a number of options, and as I've said several times, I'm self-aware. I realise this is silly that it's me talking, and I understand why you would just simply say go away. I get that. I don't think that was the problem. It may well have been, but I don't think that was the problem, because you would have sent back and said, to be honest, we're not interested in dealing with somebody who runs a Twitter account. And that would have been a perfectly legitimate response. They didn't say that, despite the fact they could have done. So maybe that's the option, but let's put it on one side. I honestly think, and I'm entirely guessing, I honestly think that you have, Chansiri talks about his people, and obviously he's got a group of people around him who are loyal to him. And I honestly think that in some way they're trying to protect him. That would be my guess. I'm entirely guessing. I think they're trying to protect him from any further embarrassment. I think they think this is going to end up with some degree of egg on his face if he shows his hand to any degree. I think they're trying to protect him. I also think he quite simply doesn't want to sell the club. I think he's terrified. I think he wants to keep hold of the club. I don't think he genuinely doesn't have any intention of selling it. He wants to keep it. He wants to stay there. He wants to pass it on to his son. I think that's his actual intention. So when somebody comes along who legitimately could buy the club, I think he's scared. I think he's upset by that. I think he's worried that there may well be a genuine offer. And I think he's scared that fans will realise that. I think he's got away with it to a large extent because such a lot of fans just don't believe that there's a buyer out there, which is the reason why I wanted to do this podcast. Hopefully one or two more will come to understand there is an alternative. Chansiri is not the only person who could possibly be owning Sheffield Wednesday. There is an alternative, and I've come to understand what the proposal is and what the plans are. And if you'll take my word for it, it's a lot better alternative. We all know what's wrong with the club. We all know what needs fixing. And we have a proposal in place where they're also aware of what's wrong and what needs fixing, well aware of what needs money spending on it, well aware of the current attitude towards fans, how fans feel, how fans are being treated, how they see it when the Derby Day tickets come out at 50, 60 quid at a time, are well aware of that situation, well aware of the criticism that there isn't the proper staff in place. We don't have a plan. We don't have a sporting director. We don't have people looking after the things on the pitch. Well aware of how badly things are done off the pitch, the commercial revenue, all of the problems of which we could spend half an hour listing. They're well aware of that and have a plan in place to be able to get the right people in place to be able to change that. And above all else, they've got the capital that needs to be injected to be able to sort it. Sheffield Wednesday desperately needs new ideas, new management, and new capital. And that option is available to us. We don't have to just simply put up with what we're currently putting up with. And that's why I'm frustrated. and that's why I want to do something about it. And I think a lot of fans will be much more inclined to get on board if they realise there was a legitimate other option.
Question for you now, Simon, is what happens next?
I don't know is the answer. I mean, I had several email conversations backwards and forwards. I tried to do so without completely burning any bridges. Although me having a podcast now may well have burnt the bridge to any degree. I would like to imagine that the opportunity is there to be able to come back. I just don't know. I don't think that Mr. Chansiri is going to be budged from his position unless he has to do something about it, which will either come from going bust, which I don't think is particularly on the horizon, and I certainly wouldn't wish that upon the club or upon him. Or the other option is fan pressure. He has always said he would leave if fans wanted him to do so. Fan pressure might make some difference, and that would be the direction that I think we should go in.
Last question for you then, Simon. In your opinion, can Dejphon Chansiri take the club forward? And by forward, I mean to progress the football club both on and off the pitch, much of which you've spoken about this evening. Not just simple investment to keep the lights on, so to speak, which is something that myself and James have discussed multiple times on the podcast. Without a sale, we've kind of covered that a little bit, but without a sale, if so, how, in your opinion, does Chansiri take this club forward?
I mean, I've got to say, first of all, it might sound otherwise, but I'm not anti-Chansiri. I really not. I quite like the guy. I think he's got a lot of things about him that I think are good. But we don't have to guess as to what the future is going to be. The results are in. He's been here for 10 years. So he's not an unknown quantity. We know what he's about. We know what he does. We know how he goes about things. And it's mediocre at best, isn't it? Let's be honest. We are in the same position now as we were 10 years ago, except we are, how many millions of pounds wasted down the road? What's going to be different in the next 10 years? Is he going to get better? I think he's kind of, again, I'm guessing and I'm putting words in other people's mouths. I think he is hoping somehow he flukes a promotion and he somehow then flukes staying in the Premier League for 3 or 4 years and is able to somehow get his money back out, or the club be worth the 150, 250 million pounds or whatever pie in the sky figure he'd like to be able to get. I think that's his only plan. How he's going to set about doing that, well, I don't think he is. The thing is, he's been here for 10 years, so we should now be reaping the benefits of all the things he put in place at the beginning. We should be having the academy kids come through. We should be on to our first, if not second generation of academy players that are now first team players at Sheffield Wednesday. We should have had all the stadiums sorted out, shouldn't we? We should have had the squad worth 50, 60, 70 million pounds because of all the players that we've bought and invested upon, where some of them are now 10 to 15, 20 million pound players. We should have had all the things in place by this stage, and it hasn't happened. So what's going to happen differently going further forward? I personally can't see anything. I think he will probably, as you mentioned there, he'll probably find a way to scrape together the £8 million a year that he's losing. It seems for some reason that he has enough wealth to cover a loss of £8 million a year. And it seems that he's happy for some reason. He's happy to continue to lose that kind of money. So I think he probably will do that. But he obviously doesn't have the money to be able to come along. He can't go in this summer to Danny Earl and say, right, here's 15, 20 million pounds that's required to give us a real good push next season. I'm pretty sure that he doesn't have the ability to do that. So when you look at the situation, can he take it forward? No, because you require of your owner two things. You require the leadership, the expertise, the guidance, the strategy of a real businessman, a real driving force to be able to take the club forward. Well, I don't think I'm being unnecessarily rude to say he's not that. He never has been, and I don't believe he's ever going to be that. He doesn't have the people around him who are ever going to do that. I mean, you look at the situation we've got off the field, it's broadly the same as it was on the field. You know, I mean, you look at Burnley, we lost 4 goals, Why do we lose 4 goals to Burnley? Because we had no defence. We're playing 2 wing backs, a winger, and our 5th choice centre back. So, what do you expect going to happen? Why are we doing that? Because we didn't invest when we needed to invest. We didn't bring people in that we need to bring in. And if you look at what the situation is off the field, it's exactly the same scenario. The CEO, when he brings a CEO in, they don't work with Chansiri for very long and they leave. Or they, for whatever reason, they move on. Whenever he brings senior members of staff in, they don't last. They move along. And as they go, we don't replace them. So we've got, Alistair, who's a perfectly nice fella, but as he said himself at the forum, he's the bloke from the ticket office. And he's now in charge. He's not there because he was the driving force. He's the man with all the ideas. He's got the passion and the expertise to really take Wednesday to the next level. No, he's there because he was the most senior person left. Everybody else is gone. He's the most senior person who can still manage to find a way to work with Mr. Chansiri on a day-to-day basis. So credit to him for that. He's a loyal man and he's found a way to carve out a niche. Or, he's able to perhaps admire the Emperor's new clothes. When other people point out that he's stark naked and we're all laughing at him, maybe the people around him admire his clothes. It seems that way. He sits on the platform of the fans forum, embarrassing himself, unfortunately, with some of the things that he came out with. He shouldn't have been there. He needs to have people around him who say, not in a million years should you be up on that platform, because he's not capable of doing it. The language barrier is a problem. His turn of the way he speaks is a problem, because people misunderstand him. He says things, and I'm quite certain he doesn't mean it the way that people then go away and take it. When he says sell your house, it sounds obnoxious. And I understand kind of what he was saying. When he asked everybody, do you run a business? I understand what he was saying. When he says to people about the future plans, it's none of your business. He was taken out of context. He didn't mean it in the way that it's been said. But that's just what's going to happen with him, because his English is not brilliant. And his turn of phrase is not brilliant, and people are expecting, a quotable phrase, and he's always up for giving them him. So the people around him shouldn't have let him be in that position. And I know Trevor Brathwaite, I think he's in charge of communications. He didn't communicate on the night, did he? All he did was tug Chansiri's shirt a few times. He should have done much more than that. He really shouldn't have been up there embarrassing himself. So in terms of Mr. Chansiri, he can't take it forward. The people he's left with at the club are nice people, loyal people, Sheffield Wednesday fans. I've no disputing that, but they aren't the dynamic force that's going to take it forward. They're the Michael Ecker kind of scenario. Nice fella, not his job. Shouldn't really be doing that job. You're asking a man to do a job that, he's not in there for. No point complaining at Marvin Johnson. He's a rubbish defender. He ain't a defender. He's a winger. So there's no point complaining that Alistair is not a brilliant general manager, because he's the guy from the ticket office. But that's how Chansiri runs the club. That's how he runs it on the field. That's how he runs it off the field. He's run out of ideas, and he appears 7 years ago to have run out of money. Is it going to go any further forward? And I also, in terms of money, I don't think people are aware of just how close to the precipice we really are. People have got these daft ideas about he runs all these businesses and he's got the money here and he's got the money there. The facts just don't back that up. They really don't. Now, you look at Sheffield 3, where they released the accounts for Sheffield 3 a month or so back. And you look at that and, he's still got the mortgage on the ground, but he's got a mortgage, and again, if you run your own business, you understand what business financing costs and things, but he's paying a mortgage at 11 point something percent. I don't know if you've got a mortgage, but I bet you don't pay 11 point odd percent. That's subprime. That's what that is. When you're paying that on a mortgage, it's subprime. That's a lender of last resort. That means nobody at all would lend money to the club, because you don't pay 12% interest rate when you're taking out a commercial mortgage for £6 million. Nobody lends at those kind of rates unless you're a lender of last resort. And bear in mind, it's not even on a 10-year term like it would be on a commercial mortgage. It's a 12-month rolling term. That should be an enormous red flag, massive alarm bells. He's paying £700,000 a year in interest just on that. Now, people say he's a wealthy man, he's got plenty of money. No, he isn't, because if he is, he'd have paid the £6 million mortgage off, and he wouldn't be paying £700,000 a year in interest. But worse than that, he doesn't even pay the interest. Every 12 months, when the loan gets renewed, he rolls the interest on. So the £6 million mortgage is a £7.8 million mortgage now, because he hasn't been servicing the interest. He's added it on. So we're in a situation where this September, it'll come up for renewal. What happens if that finance company says, look, you're not even paying the interest, we don't want to roll this on? Then what? They've got a charge over Hillsborough. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could, and we're already in a situation where the facts say he obviously can't borrow money from people, because if he could, he would have done. Now, I can't give any further information, but I have significant amounts of further information that suggests he absolutely cannot borrow money from people because he's tried. But I'm not in a position to be able to give any further details. I'm simply talking about what is public knowledge. And it's public knowledge he's paying very high interest on a very, very difficult loan. So it says to me he's struggling for money. Again, at the recent fans forum, Alistair said, and it was a full part of a massive proportion. I think he got very lucky that more has not been made of it. But Alistair clearly said that the season ticket money, the early bird season ticket money, is a cash flow injection for the club in January. He admitted to that. He never should have done. I mean, that's a terrible thing for a CEO, well, a general manager to admit. To me, that ranks along with when Gerald Ratner said, "Oh, their jewellery was crap." You can't say that you are spending next year's season ticket money this year. We all knew he was. It was obvious that's what it was for. It was a cash grab. We could see that. That's why he wanted the money early and up front, because the January transfer window comes around, and if you haven't got money for January transfers, all you can do is ask fans to pay season tickets up front. So Alistair confirmed we're already spending next year's season ticket money. Where does that end? So if you're in a situation where you're taking a payday loan, you're spending next month's money already this month, and you've borrowed money from a lender of last resort, what's that telling you about the state of your finances? If you're an individual person, you're in a bit of trouble, aren't you? You're going to struggle to be able to dig out of that hole. Well, the club has admitted we spend next year's money already. The finances show we're paying alarming amounts of interest. This is not a club that's doing well. And you bear in mind, if you go back 12 months, when we were doing the early bird, you remember the early bird season tickets, you weren't allowed to pay on your debit card, were you? Or your credit card. No. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you very clearly that the merchant services provider didn't like the arrangement, because they don't like you to pay for things now that you don't receive until later. So they've looked at that and said, hold on a minute, you're charging for season tickets in December and early January for a season that doesn't begin until next July and doesn't end until the following May. That's 18 months after you've charged for the money. Well, the merchant services provider, the credit card companies, would be on the hook if the club went bust in the intervening period of time. So I can quite clearly see that they must have got cold feet. I don't know that for certain. It's speculation, just my opinion. But I've dealt with merchant services providers quite a lot. They hate you paying up front for goods you haven't received. And it seems pretty obvious. The reason why it was PayPal or cash was because the merchant services provider didn't like the fact he was spending next year's income this year. Nobody likes that. Peter Ridsdale did that at Leeds, didn't he? How did it turn out for him? The FA don't like that. They brought in rules to say that you can't spend future money. You're not supposed to do that. Alistair admitted at the fans forum that's what the club is doing. That's a terrible situation. They ought to come out and clarify if that's not true. That's what Alistair said. That's what I heard him say. If it's not true, I'm happy to retract that. But he did say it at the forum. They probably should come out and clarify and say we're not actually spending next year's money. So I think sometimes fans don't realise that they give Chansiri more credit than he probably deserves. It seems to me that the club is hand to mouth. That the Sky money comes in. I mean, look, they talk about, he spent £3 million on Ugbo. Yeah, he did. That's true. But what happened to the Sky money? Well, the Sky money last year was about 4 or 5 million, and this year it was 9 or 10 million. The Sky, we simply got a new Sky deal negotiated nationally by the EFL. The money we got on the TV rights more than doubled. So every single club in the Championship got an extra about 4 million quid. What do? We bought Ugbo. So when we say, oh yeah, Chansiri backs his managers, well, the Sky money bought Ugbo, and you say, oh, he backs his manager in the January transfer window. No, season ticket money is what does the January transfer window. So that's you and me. We've backed the manager by buying our season ticket in January when we can't use it until July. So I think the club is absolutely hand to mouth. I think that's what the evidence suggests. And I think a lot of fans don't realise just how perilous that is. I did see some accounts. I did see a projection from one of the parties that were interested in buying the club, and they had forensic accountants overlooking the thing, and they said to me that the Chansiri will run out of money in November. And I thought, doesn't seem right to me. I'm sure he's always been all right. Well, what happened in November? We got embargo because we didn't pay the HMRC. He ran out of money. And I was told he was going to run out of money 6 months previous. So I think people don't realise just how perilous the situation is. We are hand to mouth. He is running on needing to get in season ticket money in advance. And in my opinion, when you're spending next season's money this season, eventually that's going to catch up with you. Eventually there's going to come a point in time where you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. You really are struggling. And at that point, and I don't wish it upon the club, because who wants to see your club go into administration? I don't. Who wants to see Chansiri go bankrupt? I certainly don't. I don't want to see him come into any financial difficulties. But it seems to me that now is the time that really, if he's got an option to sell, he should sell. He really should sell. You know, why, if you've got an opportunity to be able to get out with some degree of dignity, with people saying, thank you very much, you did your best, you gave it your best shot, you gave it a good solid 10 years, you spent a lot of money, and you've had to write off a good chunk of it. You know, thank you very much for the efforts that you've made, but it's time for somebody else to have a go. That's what I think is the honourable thing to do. And, you know, as I said there, you know, the future under Chansiri, I don't think it's not rosy, is it? You know, Danny Röhl is going to walk at some point, rightly so. He's not going to get backed. He's more ambitious than the club is going to be able to provide for it. And people are just shrugging the shoulders like, well, you know, that's what happens, isn't it? We're Wednesday, aren't we? That's the Wednesday way, isn't it? We never get it right. Well, why should we? Why shouldn't we have our chance at going to the Premier League? Why shouldn't we have our chance at having good ownership? Why shouldn't we have a manager who was well backed? Why don't we deserve that? So many other clubs have been able to have that. Why can't we have a turn? And if Chansiri wants to stay here and have us with a mediocre performance at best, just so he can pass it on to his son, I understand why he wants to do that. But what about my son? What about your son? What about everybody else's son? There's thousands and thousands of people who are Wednesday fans, who are from Sheffield supporters, who were here before Chansiri came and will be here when Chansiri is gone, that live in the area, care about the club. The club is nearly 160 years old. It should be seen as a community asset. It should be seen as owned by Sheffield people and Sheffield fans. All of us, our voice should count for something. Our vote should count for something, not just simply one man who happens to have lost millions of his family's money. He shouldn't have all the rights as a result of that. If we want somebody else to step in, take over, and somebody else is willing to do that, then I think he should do the honourable thing and actually put the club up for sale and allow somebody else to have a go and take us forward.
So thank you very much, Simon, for joining us this evening. I do really appreciate you giving up your time.
No problem. Enjoyed it.
Obviously getting your opinion and also kind of like the side of the story out there, and also I think some of the insights that you've given this evening, again, people will be able to use the information moving forward in whatever way they want, but I think a lot of what you have stated there is things that have been people are aware of, but I think the way in which that you've placed that in terms of the framing of the way you've discussed it has been really, really useful in terms of helping Sheffield Wednesday fans kind of moving forward. So
bear in mind, I've got my hands tied behind my back here because people can take this for what it is. There's an awful lot more information that I'm not permitted to disclose, and I really wish that I could, because I think the whole thing would be a slam dunk if I could just simply say, this is who's interested, this is how much money they've got, this is what their plans is, this is what they're going. If I could disclose all of the detail, I really wish that I could, but I can't. And I hope that people will accept my word for it, that is the case. I'm not just making things up. I'm not going to come on a podcast just to make a fool of myself, sitting here making up stories. There is a lot of information that I'm not passing on, and I think fans would change their mind on a fair few things if I passed that information on. I really do, and I do hope that fans can sort of get together. Because the thing I noticed when you put that tweet out, the number of negative comments that there were about me coming and talking about this, overwhelmingly negative comments. And I think that's one of the difficult things that we've had from Chansiri's 10 years. We've got split as a fan group, haven't we? You know, we used to say we're all Wednesday, aren't we? 10 years ago, didn't we? We used to always be saying that. And now you have a Wednesday fan podcast and a Wednesday fan Twitter account discussing Wednesday news, and everybody's slagging you off. And I think how have we come to that? We come with all the infighting, all, you know, the things that were said to the lads on the 1867 group and the way that they were treated. They're just trying to do the best for the club. I appreciate not everyone agrees with them. I didn't agree with everything they said and did. But the way that we've gone about it, I was just hoping that we as fans can get united behind someone and something. Because Chansiri has been divisive. He really has. His reign has divided us between those who want to happy clappers, as people get called, who just want to bury their heads in the sand and say, yeah, it's all right. And then the other extreme that want him out at any cost to anybody. We've become really, really divided. And just in the attendance, you know, I put a tweet out about the prices. The ordinary fan who can only go to 2 or 3 games has been alienated by this current ownership. And I've had the conversation with him. You know, he loses 20 or 30 quid for every fan that would like to come to 2 or 3 games and doesn't. And he thinks it's worthwhile. And I understand the maths, but not the morality. You know, Wednesday fans should be welcome. We want an ownership that says everybody is welcome. We're all Wednesday fans. And if you want to attend the club, you're welcome. If all you can do is come twice a year, 3 times a year, that's fine. We're not going to gouge you on price just because that's the case. You come when you can come. We need to see Hillsborough full. And people are saying, oh, he's doing all right because we're getting 23,000, 24,000. Well, imagine how many people we would have if we had a team in place that we all felt part of, if we weren't feeling disenfranchised, if there weren't so many people saying, I'm not buying a season ticket while ever he's there. Because there's a lot of people saying that. You know, we need to be able to get people together. We'd have 30,000 under Danny Earl, wouldn't we? Danny Earl with a few signings that we all wanted and having a real good push next year, we'd have 30,000 there every week. So it's no credit to the club that we get 23, 24,000 as if that's some sort of, you know, and we're doing well. No. It means you've lost and you've upset and you're frustrated and you've disappointed and you've alienated thousands of people. And you've got a whole generation of young kids who are supporting Man City and Man United and Tottenham and all kinds of things because they don't see us as being a Premier League team. It's ridiculous. We need to get back together as fans, united together. And I think we can only do that when there's a fresh owner in place. I really do.
Thank you so much for your time this evening, Simon. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much all for listening. Yeah, please don't forget to join us on obviously debate shows on Wednesdays, where if obviously you've listened to the discussion that we've had this evening, and if you've got any thoughts or feelings on it, please obviously raise them on there. And obviously please join us on Sunday for our main show, 8 p.m. on YouTube and X and all of your podcast platforms. Thank you very much, all. Have a good evening. Take care.
Thank you very much.